So I think we start now in respect of everyone's time, and people will join step by step. So good morning, everyone. We're really happy to have you here today. And this is one of the webinars in the series we have shared with you over the past weeks. And the question today is packaging. Where are we now and what can we expect post-COVID-19? And for those of you who expected a clear answer on this, I have to make you a little bit maybe not disappointed, but actually what we're doing today, we don't know the answer of this since the situation is evolving. But what we're doing today is that we will share with you insights on everything that we actually know today. And based on all data we have gathered recently during the COVID situation, we will share you a number of insights. And the overall idea is really for you to use this as inspirational material and for your internal discussions, because all of us will more or less be impacted by the fact that consumers actually do interact in a different way now. And whether it will stick or not, we don't know. But for sure, there are some movements now that do impact. So first of all, a quick introduction. I'm Maria. I'm heading up the innovation team at IPSOS Denmark. We work with fast-moving consumer goods, but also with durables, finance services, digital innovation, as well as prescription models. So we have a broad portfolio of solutions we share with our clients. And pack testing is definitely relevant for lots of different sectors. We come back to that. And I'm so happy to have Ian, my colleague, here today, because he's right now working on collecting and diluting all the data we have to create some really good insights on packaging, what's next. So I'm not sure if any one of you will confess to this kind of behavior during the past months. I'm sure there are a lot of people who have actually been extremely concerned. I have to admit that I've been thinking twice before touching anything in the grocery store and actually elsewhere as well. It's like the pack design or the pack itself has really become the symbol for hygiene and protection, but it's also represented a real big risk, at least in our perception. So lots of questions: how long can the virus live on a pack design, etc.? Is it really safe to buy products from China, or for that matter from Italy? What happens? Will the bacteria die during the travel from China and all that? So there's a lot of things in the interaction with the pack design that has changed over the past months, with a focus on hygiene and safety, definitely. And in that context, the pack is both a barrier between us and the virus, and it also protects our food from the virus. So definitely pack has become even more important out of a functional perspective, at least. So our agenda today, I will make you a short recap of the model, the thinking we have behind packaging. What are the key areas you should consider? And most of you probably already do so, but it's always really good with a reminder and think about the various steps in the process and how consumers actually interact, encounter your package, and as a consequence of that, how your brand is carried. Then I would like to share with you some quite recent findings from a study we did in Denmark early April. For those of you who joined the seminar last week, you got other parts of that study, but today we've selected to share with you the data where you can see some interesting things about packaging. And then Ian will share the global outlook. What happens in the rest of the world? What do we think? What is our hypothesis in terms of what will be next? So coming back to the model we're using. So all situations, and especially now, it's really good to have a clear structure and a clear thinking about how you manage your portfolio and how you manage your packaging. So it's key to be really aware of all the various moments of truth. The first moment of truth is, of course, how well the pack design do carry your brand, and also the brand assets or the tangible features that are so well known to consumers that build your brand, but also provide a very important shortcut to the consumer when they shop, etc. So it's the most important touch point, if you like, with your consumers. And then the first moment of truth is to understand the ability of the pack to do a really good job in shelf. So what you want to achieve is, of course, standout, findability. In some cases you want to achieve disruption in order to make sure that you disrupt the shortcut you have to the brand you like, to inspire consumers to try a new product. So the pack has a very important role doing the sales job for you in store. And then the second moment of truth, which become even more important now, if you like. The first moment, of course, also important when a lot of shifts to e-commerce, and I'll come back to that. But the second moment of truth is actually when you invite the products into your home. And right now we are quite mindful about the products we get into our home, but there are a lot of things you can do and consider around functionality, food safety, protection, and also help consumers avoid food waste, because we can see that is becoming more and more important to consumers. And what you want to do as a brand builder is to make sure that the pack sits as long as possible in the consumer's refrigerator to actually be branded every time the consumer uses your product. The third moment of truth, and increasingly so more important moment of truth, is disposal and recycling. So in this sense, the pack design is actually one of the most important driver for sustainability. And also, as you will see later, it's also where consumers primarily think they can make a difference themselves. And we have some interesting insights to share with you on that as well. So these are the three moments of truth. So when you sort of sort your thoughts, how to act in this new situation, these are all the various steps to consider and take maybe a number of different actions in order to help consumers purchase your product in a safe and confident way and stick to your brand. And of course, we've seen a huge shift to e-commerce over the past few months, especially so among consumers who actually weren't there before. For safety reasons, they've decided to buy primarily their food online. And we anticipate that we will see an equal shift within other categories and sectors for this same group, because they all of a sudden realize that this is a really good way to shop. So we actually expect this behavior to change and be developed. And given that, it's more and more important for you to consider the digital version of your brand. Make sure that the zero moment of truth cuts across all channels. So make sure also online, digital, that your brand is easy to identify, have the same appeal, the same findability that you would in a retail shelf, that is clearly branded, and that you get a good position online in all the channels you're working on, and also that the display, the design you're using is clean and uncluttered, and not the least that you actually take into account all the various tangible features you have that actually build a so well-known image of your pack and your brand. We do have a case which we will share with you as a follow-up, where you can see different executions in e-commerce and how well they actually performs in terms of preference. But we won't spend time on that now. You will get it in your inbox instead. before I hand over to Ian, I want to revisit the study we presented to you last week, and that was, I can see that some of you joined that seminar as well. It was all about traceability and climate, and this is a repeat study we've been doing actually 10 years back, and then we did it in 2019 and in 2020. So for those of you who are interested in the study, we're more than happy to share the full deck with you as a follow-up as well. But I've selected a few findings. You saw we've spoken to Thursday. It's representative for the Danish population. And fieldwork, for those of you who are curious, were during April, during the COVID situation, if you like. So let's start to think about, we ask consumers, what is the most important place for you to gather information about the product? And the majority still say that it's the information on the packaging. And also they tell us that they use certification, different type of logos, marks, to navigate, to make it easier for them to identify products that are suitable for their needs, that support what they actually want to do if they have a conscious consumption. And basically we can see that for both the two top items, the packaging and certification, women and those 55 to 65 year are significantly more inclined to say so. Whereas we can see we did a small segmentation in this study as well, and we can see that the front runners, the early adopters, are more inclined to find other ways and do some better research and use new technologies before they decide which product to buy. But the key takeout here is that clearly the pack is a very important carrier of information. So overall, we can see that the pack do have quite a big potential to be even better, or actually, if we put it another way, that it's a very good channel for you to make sure that you communicate everything you want to consumers in a clear, consistent way. Because we see that 87% of the population say that they actually would like to be even more informed about products they buy. And in that context, it's clear that the pack do have a huge role. And if you look at the chart here, I want to explain it to you. So the blue bar charts are response to when buying food and beverage, how sufficiently are you informed about impact on health, origin, ingredients, recycling, animal welfare, production, transportation, and working conditions, so everything around fair employments, etc. So all of these are actually claims that consumers that you typically would find on a pack, and the blue bars represent those who think they actually are sufficiently informed about it. The orange line then represent another question, which is, in the future, which of the below areas would you like to be even more informed about when buying food and beverage? So you can see that there is definitely a gap. So 40% claim, for example, if you look at the fourth bar from the right, that they actually are more interested to find out about packaging details. So how to recycle, renewability, reduce plastic, etc. And the other staples indicate that the pack can well be a carrier of a lot of different claims, or actually that it is the carrier of the various claims. Then it's very important to have them visible and also make sure that consumers know what they stand for in a transparent way. I also wanted to share something with you here, which actually, when looking at the numbers here, I just want to put you in a given mindset first. So last time we did this in 2019, that's the light blue staples. That was during the very, very vivid debate about plastic waste, etc. And every newspaper you opened, every discussion on the news were about plastic waste. So the awareness among consumers were really, really high at that point. And when we rerun this one, we should be aware that the media coverage of plastic was lower and significantly replaced by the corona situation. So we can see a clear drop in a number of the things that consumers expect companies to do, because this is what we ask them. What do you think a good company should do in order to be really perceived as sustainable? And you can see that use sustainable materials for packaging. We have a drop from 68 with 15% in 2020. The same for reduce the amount of packaging on the products, a drop 13%, and it goes on like that. So the key takeout here is that it seems like we have lots of other things to worry about right now. And clearly the packaging is entering in a new role. Again, it's about food safety and hygiene. It creates a barrier between me and something I really don't want in my household. Again, we can see that females and 55 to 65 are those who sort of are in the front of this. They are significant. They do significantly more agree to pretty much all of the statements actually than other age and than men do. We can also see, which is, again, I think you need to consider it in the same context as I mentioned before, we can see a drop in recycling. So this could well be because consumers are really concerned about being close to a recycle bin, which is outside of their own home, because they're concerned about the virus. We could also see that actually more consumers say that they stopped, fewer consumers say that stop reduce the use of plastic bags, etc. So we can see an overall decline in a number of the things that were very clear to us last time. And we've ventured to really try to understand what are the underlying factors, because clearly it's not because people don't think that recycling is important anymore. It could be a lot of different reasons. And with that, I want to hand over to Ian, because there's a really good link from what I've just shared with you on hygiene, sustainability, and pricing. And this is the area you'll see that Ian will share some of the insights we've gathered now. So I'll hand over to you, Ian.
Maria, go for a handover now.
Yes, let's try it. Yeah.
I think you should get a bit of feedback from your microphone, maybe, Maria, if you go off. Okay, so I think we're looking good. I trust you can all hear me okay. I want to thank you as well for your time this morning and being able to attend virtually. I'm in the UK, so obviously I think the last thing anybody wants in mainland Europe right now is a visitor from the UK. So very, very good to be able to meet virtually. So the points that Maria covered there are resonant in Denmark. They're resonant in my country. They're resonant in the data that you'll see, which I'll present today. Really, the kind of trigger to this piece of work, or this presentation, was a conversation, and actually following that, subsequent conversations with different clients.
Ian, we cannot see your screen.
Oh, you can't see my screen?
No,
okay.
No. So that's why I checked out. Technicality. So I'm totally off. Yeah.
Okay. So let me try again. I mean, luckily I wasn't really shown anything, but let's see. How about now? I've got a red box around my screen. So
yes, perfect. Yep.
Okay. So there you go. So the conversations that we've been having really can be boiled down to one central issue. So sustainability has been the story of the the year 2019, the story of the years preceding that. Really, it's been the only show in town. And the question now is, what pressures are being placed on manufacturers? What pressures are placed on retailers and governments, and of course on consumers too, in terms of sustainability? Do we continue on the trend that we've been on, or do we observe behaviors? Do we look at some of the anecdotal evidence about consumers washing hands and products and being very sensitive to hygiene? And do we react to that? And if so, how do we react to that? So the context is that there's been lots of great development to celebrate, as you can see in the chart here. It really was the only show in town up until 2019. We can see very different manifestations of sustainability. Some of it more about promoting good behavior, like the Coke example there. Please recycle this bottle, 100% plastic PET. Other more substantial innovations, for example, different for e-commerce, so a totally different way of delivering product to consumers, not just in terms of how it reaches the front door, but also how the product is delivered in use as well. So lots of great innovation, lots of different types of messaging, some of it very overt, and very much centered, and the core proposition very much centered around sustainability. All of this has been exposed to consumers. People have been reacting positively to that up until now. So this has been a win-win for everybody involved. Packaging development was able to promote new behaviors and involve people in finding better solutions where instead of discarding a perfectly functional primary pack like a trigger spray here, Unilever in this case and many other clients were launching similar innovations, but in this case you've got an evolution of the product so that you can use a concentrated refill. It means you're using 75% less plastic. You've got less carbon emissions because the weight is radically reduced. You feel good that you're using a product which is still serviceable and functional. So you're part of the solution as a consumer, and ultimately this all ladders up to our manufacturers like Unilever in this example being able to deliver on the global corporate aspirations to do better, to radically reduce plastic consumption, and ultimately shape a better future for all of us. So that was the story. Now, in the context of that, and this is February data, so we're not talking kind of peak COVID around the world, but around 28 markets were tested here, 28 countries, 20,000 people interviewed, and we can see a manifestation of that environmental story in packaging itself. So of all of the kind of personal contributions that we feel we can make on climate, the most resonant, the one which is top of mind, is avoiding products which have lots of packaging. Now, of course, that type of avoidance is very, it's actually very easy for us to do. It's kind of frictionless. I'm going to avoid that because I think this other product has less packaging or has better credentials, so therefore I can feel good about my choice there. So, if you think forward, how are you going to contribute to climate change? Packaging has a very resonant role with people to achieve that aim. So it means, of course, that brands which claim 75% less plastic, for example, that can actually be a compelling argument with consumers. Of course, it's an easy solution. You're not having to give up meat or change the way you travel. So it makes things very straightforward for people to carry out. So packaging has an important role, not just in terms of the products that we buy and reasons for choice, but underlying that, it's not just about wastage, but also there's an implicit linkage to bigger issues of environmental change as well, such as climate change. But as I said, and as Maria kind of set up as well, COVID is bringing new sort of forces or arguments to the plate. So, will this disruption cause a longer term impact? That's a big question. So, with reusable cups, for example, being withdrawn from Starbucks, for good reason, presumably, the statement from Starbucks was that we want to care for the health and well-being of customers and partners. But because this becomes an issue, because consumers are all of a sudden exposed to the idea that they can't, exchange their cup with the Starbucks employee in front of them. The idea of surface transmission, has the potential to become a thing and to be reinforced by that type of new requirements and new restriction. As a function of that, there's more plastic right now. Anecdotally, people are perceiving that actually it's okay to buy products which have greater protection because of they have more plastic, and in that environment there are also pressures as well. So real pressures in terms of consumer confidence. We look back at the last recession here and consider data from Mintel, and in the 2008 global recession, excuse my Siri there. In the 2008 global recession, issues around sustainability and paying a premium, for example, for sustainable and ethical goods, they actually became under pressure for quite obvious reasons, that people's spending power was constricted and pressured. And those pressures today, of course, are very much real as well as a function of events. So on average, we're seeing that around 40% of employed people around the world, as measured in May, fear for their jobs. Now, in markets which are coming out of the coronavirus, the height of coronavirus, for example, like Germany, like China, indeed, we're seeing a kind of downward phase. But there are still concerns, and those concerns are significant. So bringing this into play, how can we frame out the impacts that we're seeing, and how can we translate that into an argument, or at least some guidance as to which path to take forward for our clients in view of the consumer response here. So there are probably at least three issues at play. There's the hygiene issue, which is illustrated here by the products in the bathtub. There's the direct influence on perceived sustainability. So we're no longer being able to use our reusable cups, at least for the short term. Who knows if it's going to be longer term, but that's going to be a direct impact potentially as well. And there's the impact of spending power. So what we'll do in the next 15 minutes is try and bring all that together in a way which summarizes the data that we have. Now, people do still want to act responsibly. So April 16th across 14 countries in a period of peak COVID, let's say. In that period, we still want to aspire to buy things and do things better. So I'm going to seek out healthier and better for the environment products. We've got about 80% agreement in that. And we've seen similar data which shows that the majority of people worldwide want a recovery to be green-based, to be rooted and platformed in good behavior and responsible behavior. So our underlying aspirations and attitudes and expectations haven't fundamentally shifted. We aspire to a better world, which is healthier and better for the environment. And being able to buy products which support that is at least attitudinally very well accepted and regarded globally, as you can see from that data. But there are concerns. So we have a very simple and direct question here, which again we've asked to 16 countries in this case, comparing products of similar quality and features, which are the following two are most important to you when you make a final purchase decision. So, very direct polling questions, but nevertheless, this basic question is good at uncovering some of the issues and comparing the strengths and resonance of some of the issues at play. And really, it tells us that lower price is the main motivation. Hygiene and sustainability are secondary concerns across these 14 countries surveyed. Now, that's not surprising, particularly in a period of economic uncertainty. It's an important reminder of consumer priorities. And also, it's an indication of the risk from store brands, for example. So, if you're all things equal, your key triggers are around price and origin. Well, actually, in my country, for example, Aldi and Lidl, they do that really well. They do origin and provenance really well. And of course, they do pricing very well as well. So if we consider all of the issues at play, then we shouldn't ignore the role of price, in place of hygiene and in place of sustainability So it's important too, we framed this in a way which is really trying to understand whether hygiene is an issue which is going to pop. And you can see there, 29%, it's kind of secondary. It's there, but it's not rising to the top. So if we start from the position that, the extreme is that people are going home and bathing their products in the bath and disinfecting them or leaving them outside for 3 days, of course, some of that type of behavior is happening anecdotally. People do want to have products which are, of course, hygienic. People do want to have products which are sustainable and responsible, but really, the underlying issues haven't changed in respect to actually they want value and they want to know where their products are from as well. Ideally, for example, if you're buying food, then it's locally sourced. So that gives us an initial indication. Now, most markets kind of tend towards price as well. If you look at, and we're not going to look in detail here, and we'll share the file, of course, but there are some which are a bit more towards hygienic packaging. So Brazil, India, and China, along with Mexico, are noted for that. And interestingly, China is also picking up on eco-friendly here as well to a greater degree. And we've seen data actually from China, which is reflecting as a function of the experiences that they had, which of course were before anybody else. There's been a shift in terms of the values and social values that people aspire to in China. We've seen that 64%, for example, have said that COVID-19 has affected their social values. 75% are more health conscious, 60% are more after a peaceful life. And I think we're seeing a kind of manifestation of that in terms of the sensitivity to eco packaging as well as represented in the data here. So there is a consistent sort of emphasis and sensitivity to lower price, irrespective of the market. Now, behavior, of course, has changed, and we've all experienced that. So practical concerns, as we see here, outweigh environmental. So all of these aspects are issues which can be controlled, all of the important aspects here. So a full 38% of a global 16-country bucket are avoiding certain types of store. 37% are disinfecting products. So, we don't understand if they're disinfecting products through, bathing the product or wiping it down, but we know that there is a good proportion, 1 in 3 people who claim in the past few weeks to have disinfected a product. And again, we're going to see differences in that at a country level. From a very rational state in Germany, only 9% exhibit that behavior in the last few weeks, all the way to a country like Brazil, who are obviously very much involved in COVID right now, who are doing that to the rate of 56%. So looking at this evidence, the question still comes to mind, okay, We understand price is important. We understand origins are important. Hygiene is in the background of two, of course, and we can see that behavior itself in some markets is very manifest in terms of hygiene. Do we begin to develop products in that regard? Then do we begin to focus our packaging development towards hygiene and, for example, less towards sustainability? That's the kind of central question. And one of the points here is that although there are behaviors in that regard, the actual perception or expectation that they're buying products which specifically are packaged using hygienic packaging or sanitized additional wrapping or contactless facilities, it's there in 1 in 5 people, but it's a lot less than the behavioral aspect, let's say. So, irrespective of how products are packaged, there are going to be behaviors around cleaning. But the actual intent to search out packaging, which is perceived to be particularly hygienic, is at a lower level. There are country differences, but it's at a lower level in general. So if we kind of frame that out as best as we can in a directional way, then it's price first. It's hygiene manifesting itself in terms of behavior. More so than in attitudes to searching out hygienic packaging. Like social distancing, that type of cleaning behavior can be controlled. It's something you can do at your own, at your own will, and when you get your shopping home. Sustainability is there attitudinally in the background, but it's secondary, with China as a bit of an outlier, consistent with the types of values which are being expressed by people in that country post-COVID. So the central question then is that, on the basis of this, do we quit all of the kind of sustainability development that we highlighted as being positive, in order, for example, to, not to be too flippant here, in order to develop cheaper packaging that you can go home and bathe? Do we use less plastic to promote sustainability, or do we use more plastic to promote hygiene and cleanliness? Now, one of the directions that we can provide in that regard is a claims test that we've done May 3 weeks ago in the UK. And the idea here was to really try and understand some radical claims around COVID in context of more broader benefits and in context of packaging as well. And I won't go through the detail, of course. These will be shared in your inbox. As Maria mentioned, you can take a look. But this is of kind of stretching out the types of ideas and claims which resonate with people. In the UK, in May, which is a period, of course, of wall-to-wall communication around COVID, where people are still locked down, and where people are presumably very sensitive to messaging on that subject. And as we can see, in general terms, kind of stress and positive benefits around immunity take more precedence or are more appealing than ideas which are a lot more about sanitation and health. And as you can see at the bottom of the list here, we've introduced ideas on packaging which are very extreme. These products probably, well, they don't. These materials don't exist in real world terms. But packaging which is made from antiviral materials, that's actually the least appealing claim across the board. So although people are sensitive to hygiene, although they might manifest that sensitivity at home by washing products, we're not in a situation where people are going to very readily kind of be triggered by ideas that we can introduce new materials which are going to suppress the transmittability of COVID and other types of viruses. Okay, that's quite a new to the world claim. It will take understanding and reinforcement, but in its own terms, in its spontaneous terms, which is measured through preference and also through speed of response in this measure. These are claims which are not resonating. And actually, if you pull out this data in terms of the broader set of 32 claims that we tested, it is ideas around wholesomeness being additive free and helping me to sleep, helping me and my family's immunity, which are a lot more appealing than the more specific ideas around packaging. Now, one interesting aspect here is biodegradability. And we'll see that represented on the next chart in the interest of time here. So across the 32 claims tested here, you can see that biodegradable packaging, okay, quite an aspirational attribute in itself, but something which has very quick appeal for people. It's the fastest attribute that people responded to in the survey, and also one of the most preferred. We can see that idea still comes into play. So, you know, what we're trying to build here is an idea that you've got your economic pressures. That is the sort of the background noise that we all face, and we have to innovate against. We have behaviors which manifest itself, as we've seen and discussed, but when it comes down to attributes and development of packaging, those which are most appealing are those which reinforce this idea that, you know, there's goodness out there. You want to be respectful to the environment. You want to choose products which are, you know, responsible choices, and the most resonant idea behind that is the idea of biodegradability. That fits in well with people's frameworks in terms of what makes a positive claim and a positive contribution to their choices. And the interesting thing here, by contrast, is that these very kind of hardcore claims around hygiene are actually diminished in this UK data. They are very much lower down the list. The interesting thing as well, just as an aside, is that you know, packaging which uses less material and is better for the environment, that's actually a message which resonates more than packaging which uses less material as a function of keeping price low. So as you talk pack, you have to maintain the narrative. You know, you can't switch communication around against the communication that people have been receiving for many years now, and you know, you have to play to those consistent ideas in a way which obviously therefore makes sense for consumers and fits in with their understanding. Now, one way to kind of to test that and to play into that is of course through measurements, and I'm just going to give you a 2-minute summary of this. We introduced a new brand to consumers called Sustain, and we really the goal here was to understand what is the impact of an environmental message, and we, as you can see from the image on the left-hand side, we've done that in a very stark way. So, you know, there's a brand without messaging versus a brand with environmental messaging and claims, for example, around ocean plastic. And as you can see on screen with the video, we've introduced that in a familiar environment, very, very Amazon-like, let's say, and people are able to shop. We can see how long they stayed with messages. We can see what they clicked and ultimately what they chose as well. Now, that was a behavioral experiment. On top of that, we also checked some attitudes and standard questions, and we saw pretty quickly that both brands were fairly well liked, but the idea of having claims to support the branding, to support the new launch was attractive and led to a higher overall liking and also a higher propensity to give it 5 stars. So, you know, that's a positive messaging. Associations were positive as well. So, spontaneous mentions of sustainability were, quite rightly a lot higher with the claim on the right, the packaging which has those sustainable claims. So that messaging was getting through very clearly. Spontaneous associations on attributes were positive as well. So, we had very high cut through for recycled issues around plastics, plastics and less plastic. And the interesting thing is that wasn't detrimental to functional expectations either. So far a very good news story. But of course, the question is, how is that going to manifest itself in terms of behavior? And the outcome of that study was basically, if you, all things equal, parity pricing deliver a compelling environmental message, then there is a positive response. So trial was actually significantly higher with those conditions. So parity pricing and a positive, sustainability message. But what we saw is that as you increase price, as you provide some friction to the new initiative, then your trial drops off, and we can no longer talk about a significant increase as we had in the case of parity pricing. So all things equal, we're moving from a situation where sustainability has a positive impact, but as soon as you bring friction into the equation, you get a more negative response. And that is, that's a relevant issue to explore. And this was US data, by the way, measured in February. That's a relevant issue to explore because, as we move our packaging development forward in 2020 and beyond, the core question of how much should the events of COVID impact long-term development, the rules that we have established over the years, the fact that people respond well to environmental messages, but when it comes down to it, they're not going to give anything up for it. So they say that they're really positive, and yeah, that's great, and I'm going to buy into that. But the actual doing, when you've got choices, when you've got compromises, when you have to pay more money, for example, that's when you see friction, and that's when you see the role of sustainability in this case begin to diminish. So that has a kind of a contribution to our story here. So people they do want to act responsibly, as we've seen, and we've seen that in the Danish data that there are nevertheless pressures, short-term pressures on how we behave and how we recycle. Our focus and our consciousness, of course, is more towards health and hygiene as a function of events. So naturally, other issues get displaced. But we shouldn't overlook the fact that, we want our recovery to be green, and we want to be part of a future which is about healthier and more sustainable products. When purchasing, we want to do the right thing. But we're not going to compromise on quality, features, and price, and of course safety comes into play as well. So what that means is that hygiene as a claim in context of other benefits and other issues that are important when making a choice. Hygiene only gets you so far, and if you look back at the UK data, for example, those very strong hygiene claims were actually displaced by more resonant, more familiar, positive sustainability claims. So if you bring that context as well and add in price, then there isn't really the evidence to suggest that the path that manufacturers are on today and have been on is compromised by the issues that we face and have all experienced. So whether people are particularly sensitive to hygiene, those behaviors are going to happen in any case. It doesn't require innovation or development to accommodate them and even to promote them, because of course separate to all of this discussion is the science, so which is still inconclusive, but certainly points towards the fact that transmission risk from surface is of course much lower than, for example, human to human. So there's only so much manufacturers can control in any case through their packaging. So, these issues are not insignificant, of course. Positioning around hygiene would be beneficial, but, to change the whole supply chain to accommodate that would be a very big risk indeed. Sustainability in the context of pricing is secondary, but as we've seen, the right types of messaging can certainly resonate. These very assertive, new to the world claims that we looked at, for example, antiviral, or claims which are around, smart packaging, which tells you if the product is being contaminated, they're just not cutting through with immediacy or with, any level of overall preference in context of the other types of claims which are available to people. So, mindful of time, a couple of minutes over, I think, sustainable development remains relevant in the height of COVID. And I think, we don't have, as Maria pointed out, there isn't the silver bullet here to support that, but there are points of evidence that I think give confidence that the general trend, which is being established, should, be maintained. The companies that continue to drive better environmental outcomes, that continue to communicate well with consumers, to talk sensibly about their products and the impact that their products have, even in face of the dynamic pressures that we have, reduced consumer confidence and sensitivity to cleaning and hygiene. But getting ahead of that, getting ahead of the science and presenting it in a way which makes sense in partnership, of course, with retailers, is really a sensible and pragmatic course. But of course, the outlook on sustainability hasn't changed as well in terms of what people are willing to compromise on. So choices are going to be driven by benefits. They will and always, have been. You don't buy a shampoo because it's got, I'm talking in the majority here, we don't buy shampoo because it comes in a sustainable packaging. We buy shampoo because it makes our hair healthy and looks great. Of course, if it comes in sustainable packaging, even better. It gives me a reason to choose it over a manufacturer, a competitor. But really, it's the benefits which matter. But in this context, as we globally, presumably head towards, recessionary pressure, we have to be careful that the things which are motivating choice, particularly amongst people who are facing more pressure on finances, we have to be, of course, mindful that the portfolio of brands that we offer, the distribution that we have, do we play in hard discounters, for example? These are questions which are very much more resonant now than they have been before because of economic pressure more so than health pressure, for example. So overall, an outlook which I think is positive in the sense that the direction of travel makes complete sense still, but in context of price, in context of financial pressures, to be mindful that there is the potential of consumers to shift to lower price segments, and as a function of that, do you as a brand decide to play there? And if so, what mix and what packaging, what price level, what benefits do you offer? These basic marketing issues are still prevalent irrespective of the situation. So I'm a few minutes over, and I apologize for that, but it was a lot of content to get through. But Maria, you want to wrap up?
I just wanted to leave you with this slide as well and say thank you very much, Ian. So for everyone who's listening now, what you just heard about is, it was actually, you didn't want me to say that, Ian, world premiere, but actually it was because you're working on a global paper together with a couple of other colleagues around this topic, and it will soon be out, and we will of course be more than happy to share. So we sort of caught you in the creative process here when you were working around framing the topic, and clearly there are lots of very, very relevant and important things to consider going forward, especially so if you work in an international global context where you have several markets and situations to consider with different maturity. So I think basically that's it, and I can see time is running. Do we have any questions?